The stars looked different this far from Earth. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge and watched the asteroid field drift past the view screen. He had been exploring space for 5 years now, but the wonder never quite faded. Behind him, his small crew worked at their stations, running routine scans of the rocky debris. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," Amy Rodriguez said from the pilot's seat. She was young, barely 26, but she was the best pilot Jake had ever worked with. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls as she brought up a new display. "There's a signal coming from inside the asteroid field. It's not on any frequency we use." Jake moved closer to look at the screen. The signal pulsed in an odd pattern, definitely artificial but nothing like human technology. "Could it be a probe from another colony?" "Negative, sir," Kyle Bennett called out from the engineering station. The tall man adjusted his glasses and studied his own readouts. "The signal structure is completely foreign. I've never seen anything like it." Lisa Chen, their medic, looked up from where she had been organizing medical supplies. "You think it's aliens?" The word hung in the air. Humanity had been exploring space for decades but had never found intelligent life. There were theories, hopes, and dreams, but no proof, until maybe now. "Only one way to find out," Jake said. He felt his heart beat faster. "Amy, can you get us closer?" "Already plotting a course, Captain." The Horizon's Edge was not a military ship. It was an exploration vessel, lightly armed and built for discovery rather than combat. They moved carefully through the asteroid field, dodging the larger rocks while Amy's skilled hands kept them steady. The signal grew stronger as they approached. "There," Kyle said, pointing at the screen. "It's coming from that cluster of asteroids ahead." As they rounded a particularly large rock, they saw it. A ship floated in space, caught between 3 massive asteroids. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The hull was silver and seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Strange symbols covered its surface, and its design was unlike anything human engineers had ever created. "It's damaged," Amy reported. "I'm seeing hull breaches on the port side and the engines are cold." "Life signs?" Jake asked. Lisa worked her console quickly. "Yes, but faint. Maybe 2, possibly 3 individuals on board. Their biology is different from ours, but they're definitely alive." Jake made his decision quickly. "Suit up, Amy, bring us alongside." "Kyle, Lisa, you're with me. We're going over there." 20 minutes later, Jake floated through space toward the alien ship. His suit felt heavy, and the silence was absolute except for his own breathing. Kyle and Lisa followed close behind. They found an airlock that had been partially blown open, making entry easier but also showing how badly damaged the ship was. Inside, emergency lighting cast everything in a red glow. The corridors were taller than human ones, and the walls had a strange texture, almost organic. Jake led the way, following Lisa's scanner toward the life signs. They passed rooms full of technology they couldn't begin to understand and saw signs of violence. Scorch marks on the walls, broken equipment, and something that might have been blood but was a pale blue color. "Through here," Lisa said, pointing to a door at the end of the corridor. The door was stuck halfway open. Jake squeezed through and found himself in what looked like a command center. 2 bodies lay on the floor, clearly dead, but huddled in the corner, wrapped in a tattered cloak, was a living being. She looked almost human at first glance. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head with features that could have been called a face, but her skin had a faint silver sheen and her eyes were larger, with pupils that were deep violet. Her hair was long and white as snow. She looked up at them with fear and defiance mixed together. "Easy," Jake said softly, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. "We're here to help." The alien woman said something in a language that sounded like music and wind chimes. Her voice was beautiful, even in distress. She tried to stand but stumbled, clearly injured. Lisa moved forward quickly with her medical scanner. "She's been hurt," Lisa said. "Internal injuries, and she's losing blood or whatever they have instead of blood. Can you help her?" Jake asked. "I can stabilize her, but we need to get her back to our ship." That's when the alarms started blaring. Amy's voice crackled over the radio, urgent and frightened. "Captain, we have incoming ships. 3 of them armed and heading straight for us." "They're not friendly," Jake cursed under his breath. "How long do we have?" 5 minutes, maybe less." He looked at the alien woman. She seemed to understand something was wrong. She grabbed his arm with surprising strength and spoke rapidly in her language, pointing at herself and then at the dead bodies on the floor. "She's important," Kyle said. "Look at her clothing. Those markings, that jewelry. I think she's royalty or something. Which means those ships are probably here for her. Jake finished. Okay, new plan. Lisa, do what you can for her right now. Kyle, help me get her to our ship. Amy, prepare for immediate departure. They moved as fast as they could, but the alien woman was weak. Jake ended up carrying her in his arms, surprised by how light she was. They made it back to the horizon's edge, just as the attacking ships arrived. Through the view screen, Jake could see them clearly now. They were smaller than the damaged ship, but sleek and dangerous looking. Weapons ports glowed with ready energy. They're hailing us, Amy said. Audio only. Put them through. A harsh grating voice filled the bridge, speaking in that same musical language. The alien woman in Jake's arms cried out and said something that sounded like a denial. I don't suppose anyone speaks their language? Jake asked, already knowing the answer. The transmission ended abruptly. One of the attacking ships fired. The blast hit an asteroid near them, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. That was a warning shot, Kyle said unnecessarily. Jake gently set the alien woman down in a chair, making sure she was secure. She grabbed his hand and looked into his eyes. Even without words, he could see her gratitude and her fear. He nodded to her, trying to reassure her, then turned to his crew. Amy, get us out of here. Maximum speed. They're faster than us, Captain, Amy said, but her hands were already moving. The horizon's edge turned and accelerated, but the attacking ships pursued. Energy blasts lit up the space around them. Amy dodged and weaved through the asteroid field with incredible skill, using the rocks as cover. But there were 3 enemy ships and only 1 horizon's edge. Shields at 60%, Kyle reported as another blast clipped them. We can't take much more of this, Jake thought quickly. They couldn't outrun the attackers and they couldn't outgun them, but maybe they could outsmart them. Amy, head deeper into the asteroid field. The densest part you can find, Captain, that's suicide. One wrong move and we'll be crushed. Trust me, Amy did. She always had. The horizon's edge dove deeper into the field where the asteroids were packed tight together. The larger ship had trouble following, but the smaller attack ships were more maneuverable. They stayed close, firing whenever they had a clear shot. Kyle, can you override the cargo bay doors? Jake asked. Yes, but why would you? Kyle's eyes widened. Oh, that's clever. Do it. At Jake's signal, Kyle opened the cargo bay doors wide. The sudden decompression vented atmosphere and debris out into space, right into the path of the pursuing ships. Containers, equipment, and loose materials created a cloud of obstacles. One attack ship couldn't dodge in time and collided with a heavy cargo container, sending it spinning away with damage to its engines. But the other 2 were still coming. We need to get out of this field, Amy said. But they'll catch us in open space. Jake looked at the alien woman. She was watching him with those violet eyes, and he saw something there. Hope, maybe, or faith. This woman, whoever she was, had been running from killers. Her crew was dead. She was alone and hurt. And now she was depending on him and his crew for survival. He made a decision that would change everything. Amy, when I give the word, full stop. Cut all engines. What? Captain, just be ready. He walked to the weapons locker and pulled out the emergency suits for combat. They weren't military grade, but they had some armor. Kyle understood what Jake was planning and started to protest. Captain, no. You can't get her to safety, Jake said simply. That's an order. Amy, get ready to run the second I'm clear. Don't wait for me. Jake, Lisa started now. Amy cut the engines. The horizon's edge stopped suddenly, and the 2 pursuing ships shot past them, caught off guard by the maneuver. In that brief moment, Jake opened the airlock and launched himself into space, using his suit's thrusters to intercept one of the attack ships. It was insane. It was desperate. But it worked. Jake managed to grab onto the hull of one ship. Through its window, he could see the pilot's shocked face. The ship jerked and twisted, trying to throw him off, but Jake held on. He pulled a cutting torch from his belt and started burning through the sensor array on the hull. Blind, the ship fired wildly, and one of its blasts hit its companion ship by accident. The horizon's edge used the chaos to escape. Amy pushed the engines to their limit, racing away from the asteroid field. Jake watched them go and felt relief. The alien woman would be safe. His crew would be safe. Then something hit him hard from behind. The remaining attack ship had... Jake Morrison floated in darkness. He could not feel his body. He could not see or hear. There was only the void and a growing cold that seemed to reach into his very soul. Death felt peaceful in a way. No more pain, no more fear. Just the endless quiet. Then he felt something else. Warmth. It started small like a distant star, but it grew stronger. With the warmth came light, soft and silver. And with the light came a voice speaking words he could not understand, but that somehow made sense in his fading mind. The alien woman, the princess if Kyle had been right. She was calling to him. Jake tried to respond but had no voice. The darkness pulled at him, wanting to drag him down into nothing, but the warmth fought back. It wrapped around him like arms, holding him, refusing to let go. He felt her presence not just near him but inside him, filling the empty spaces where life was slipping away. Time became meaningless. Hours or days or moments he could not tell, but slowly the warmth won. The darkness retreated, and Jake opened his eyes. The room was bathed in soft blue light. The ceiling above him was not metal but something that looked almost like crystal. Medical equipment surrounded his bed, but none of it was human technology. Everything hummed with a strange energy he could feel against his skin. "Captain!" Lisa's face appeared above him, and he had never been so happy to see someone. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and her hair pulled back messily. "Thank God. We thought we'd lost you." Jake tried to speak, but his throat was dry. Lisa held a cup of water to his lips, and he drank gratefully. "Where?" he managed to croak out. "A Valtherian outpost. That's what they call themselves, the Valtherians. After what you did, the princess directed us here through hand signals and their ship's computer. We've been here for 6 days. 6 days. Jake tried to process that. "The princess?" "She's fine." "More than fine. She saved your life, Jake." Before Lisa could explain further, the door to the room opened with a soft hiss. The alien woman entered, and Jake saw her clearly for the first time without the chaos of emergency. She was tall, perhaps 6.5 feet, with that silver-sheened skin that seemed to glow from within. Her white hair flowed down to her waist, and she wore robes of deep purple that looked like they were made from liquid starlight. Her violet eyes fixed on him immediately. She moved to his bedside and said something in her language. Her voice was still musical, but there was emotion in it now. Relief, joy, and something else he could not name. "Princess Ziraeth," Lisa said, pronouncing the name carefully. "That's what she's called. She's been here with you almost constantly." "Jake, she did something. Some kind of ritual. She wouldn't let you die." Ziraeth reached out and touched Jake's forehead gently. The moment her fingers made contact, he gasped. It was not just touch. He could feel her emotions washing over him like a wave. Her relief that he was awake, her gratitude for what he had done, and underneath it all, a deep connection that had not been there before. "What did she do to me?" Jake asked, alarmed but not frightened. Kyle entered the room carrying a tablet that displayed translations. The Valtherians had been teaching them their language through their computers, and the humans were picking it up quickly, with the help of translation programs. "It's called the Quantum Oath. Near as we can understand, she bound her life force to yours. When you were dying, she kept you alive by sharing her own energy. She saved me." "In a way, you both saved each other," Kyle said. "But Jake, there's more. The Quantum Oath doesn't just heal. It creates a permanent bond. You're connected to her now, psychically, emotionally. We're not sure of all the details, but the Valtherians take this very seriously." Jake looked at Ziraeth. She was watching him with those incredible eyes, and he realized he could sense her feelings. Not read her mind, but feel her emotions as if they were his own. It should have been intrusive, frightening, but instead it felt natural, like he had been missing this connection his whole life and only now realized it. "Why?" he asked her directly. Ziraeth seemed to understand. She spoke slowly, and Kyle's tablet translated with a slight delay. "You gave your life for mine. No hesitation, no demand for reward. In my culture, this is the highest honor. The Quantum Oath was the only way to save you, but it was also my choice. I could not let you die for me." Over the next few days, Jake recovered quickly. Too quickly, according to Lisa. His wounds healed at a rate that should have been impossible. The energy blast that had nearly killed him left only a scar on his back, and even that was fading. He found he needed less sleep, and his senses were sharper. Everything about him was changing. "The bond is altering your biology," Lisa explained one afternoon while checking his vitals. "Your cells are regenerating faster. Your lifespan is probably extending. Jake, you're not entirely human anymore." That should have terrified him. Instead, Jake found himself strangely calm about it. Perhaps it was the bond itself, Ziraeth's peaceful presence at the edge of his mind, keeping him centered. Amy and Kyle had been busy learning everything they could about the Valtherians. They discovered that the Valtherian Empire was vast, spanning dozens of star systems. They were an old race, having traveled the stars for thousands of years. They valued honor above all else, and their laws were complex and ancient. The assassins were from a rival house, Amy explained during a briefing in Jake's medical room. Princess Ziraeth was traveling on a diplomatic mission when they attacked. They killed her guards and crew. She was the only survivor until we found her. They'll try again, Jake said, probably. But right now we have a bigger issue. Amy looked uncomfortable. News of what happened has reached the Valtherian homeworld. The Queen is coming. The Queen? Ziraeth's mother. Empress Lysaravan, ruler of the Valtherian Empire. And according to what we've learned, she's not coming for a friendly visit. She's coming to deal with a situation that involves ancient laws and her daughter's use of the quantum oath. Jake felt a spike of worry from Ziraeth through their bond. He found her in the garden area of the outpost, a beautiful space filled with plants that glowed softly in the dim light. She stood looking at a fountain that flowed upward instead of down, defying gravity in a way that was mesmerizing. Your mother is coming, Jake said. He did not need Kyle's translator anymore. Something about the bond made understanding easier, as if he was learning her language directly from her mind. Yes, Ziraeth said softly. She will not be pleased. Why? You saved my life. I bound you without your consent, without understanding what it would mean. In our culture, the quantum oath is sacred. It is used only between life partners or in the most extreme circumstances. I have tied your fate to mine forever. Jake moved to stand beside her. Through the bond, he could feel her guilt and her worry. You saved my life, he repeated. I'm not angry about that, but you do not understand what it means. You can never fully leave me now. If I am in danger, you will feel it. If I suffer, you will suffer. And there are laws, ancient laws, about what happens when royalty creates such a bond. What laws? Before she could answer, alarms began to sound throughout the outpost. Amy's voice came over the communication system. Captain, you need to get to the landing bay now. The Queen's fleet just arrived. The landing bay was enormous, large enough to hold dozens of ships. But it was empty except for the horizon's edge and a few Valtherian vessels. Now through the atmospheric shield that kept the air in, Jake could see ships descending. Not just a few ships, but hundreds. They filled the sky like a swarm of silver birds, each one larger and more impressive than the last. One ship was larger than all the others combined. It descended slowly, majestically, and landed with barely a whisper. The boarding ramp extended and guards marched out in perfect formation. They wore armor that seemed to be made of liquid metal and carried weapons that hummed with power. Then she appeared. Queen Lysaravan. If Ziraeth was beautiful, her mother was magnificent. She stood even taller, perhaps 7 feet, and her presence filled the entire landing bay. Her skin had the same silver sheen but seemed to glow brighter. Her hair was not white but silver like precious metal, and it floated around her as if moved by an invisible wind. She wore robes of deep black that were covered in stars that actually twinkled, as if she had wrapped herself in the night sky. Her eyes were violet like her daughter's, but colder, harder. The eyes of someone who had ruled for centuries and made decisions that affected billions. Those eyes fixed on Jake, and he felt pinned in place like a butterfly on display. The Queen spoke, and her voice carried easily across the landing bay. I am Lysaravan, ruler of the Valtherian Empire, guardian of the Silver Throne, keeper of the Quantum Crown. I have come to see the human who sacrificed himself for my daughter. Jake found his voice, though it took effort. I'm Captain Jake Morrison of Earth. I did what anyone would do. The Queen's expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. No, not anyone. Most beings value their own lives above all else. You threw yourself into death without hesitation. This act has invoked ancient laws. She moved forward with the grace of a predator. Her guards followed, and Ziraeth stepped forward from where she had been standing behind Jake. Mother, please. Silence, daughter. The command was not harsh but absolute. Ziraeth stopped speaking immediately. The Valtherian homeworld was called Silvara, and it took Jake's breath away. The planet glowed with a soft light even from space, as if the entire world was lit from within. Cities sprawled across continents, their buildings reaching toward the sky like silver trees. Oceans shimmered with colors that did not exist on Earth, and mountains floated in the air, held up by technology Jake could not begin to understand. The Queen's flagship brought them down to the capital city, a place so vast that Jake could not see where it ended. The royal palace sat at the center, a structure that defied description. It seemed to be made of crystal and light, constantly shifting and changing. Towers spiraled upward, and bridges connected buildings that floated without support. Jake's crew was housed in comfortable quarters in a building reserved for foreign dignitaries. But Jake was taken to the palace itself, to rooms that were larger than his entire ship had been. The walls showed images of space and stars, changing to show different views from across the empire. The furniture adjusted itself to his size and comfort. Everything was beautiful and alien and overwhelming. "This is too much," Jake said to Kyle, who had been allowed to visit him. "I'm just a ship captain. I don't belong here." "Maybe that's exactly why she chose you," Kyle replied. He sat in a chair that had molded itself perfectly to his body. "From what we've learned, the Valtherians have a thing about purity of intent. You didn't save the princess because you wanted something. You just did it because it was right. That doesn't mean I should be bonded to their queen. Does it really matter what you think you should be? You're already bonded to Ziraeth. The queen just invoked some kind of claim over that bond. I don't think you get a choice here, Jake." But that was the problem. Jake had always made his own choices. He had chosen to become a ship captain. He had chosen his crew. He had chosen to explore space. Now he was being told his future was already decided, and he hated it. Over the next few weeks, Jake learned about Valtherian culture. Teachers came to his rooms every day. Patient beings who explained history, laws, and customs. He learned that the Valtherians lived for centuries, with the queen being over 300 years old. He learned about the quantum crown, a device that connected the ruler to every Valtherian in the empire. He learned about honor codes and ritual combat and the sacred bonds that held their society together. He also learned about the queen's last bonded partner. His name had been Kethel Lar, and he had died 80 years ago defending the queen from an assassination attempt. She had not taken another partner since then, despite pressure from her advisors. The grief of losing a bonded one was profound, and many Valtherians never recovered from it. She must have loved him very much, Jake said to his teacher, an old Valtherian named Vex who had served the royal family for 2 centuries. "She did," Vex agreed. His silver hair had faded to white with age, and his eyes were kind. "But she is also queen. She cannot allow personal loss to weaken the empire. A queen without a bonded one is seen as incomplete, vulnerable. It has been used against her by those who oppose her rule. So I'm political. Everything the queen does is political. But do not mistake that for lack of genuine feeling. She would not claim you if she did not see something worthy in you." Jake wanted to believe that, but it was hard. He rarely saw the queen during those first weeks. She was busy running an empire, meeting with advisors, dealing with crises across dozens of worlds. When he did see her, it was at formal dinners or ceremonies where they barely spoke. She was always regal, always in control, always distant. But he saw Ziraeth often. The princess sought him out regularly, and their bond made it easy for her to find him. They walked in the palace gardens, which were filled with plants from 100 worlds. They talked about everything and nothing. She taught him more of the Valtherian language, and he taught her about Earth. "I am sorry," Ziraeth said one evening as they sat by a fountain that sang instead of splashed. "I never meant for this to happen. The bond was supposed to save you, not trap you." "You didn't trap me," Jake assured her. Through their connection, he could feel her genuine regret. "You saved my life. I'll always be grateful for that. But now you are claimed by my mother. I have lost the right to the bond I created." Her voice was soft with sadness. "In our culture, this is a great dishonor to me. It means I was not worthy to maintain the bond." Jake reached out and took her hand. The touch sent warmth through both of them, the bond strengthening with physical contact. "You are worthy. Your mother invoked an old law, but that doesn't change what you did. You're brave and kind, and you saved a stranger without hesitation." She smiled at him, and it lit up her face. "You are kind as well, Jake Morrison. Too kind for what this world will demand of you." She was right to worry. The political situation was complicated. News of a human being claimed by the queen had spread across the empire, and reactions were mixed. Some saw it as a sign of strength, the queen choosing a proven warrior. Others saw it as weakness, taking a partner from a primitive species. The opposition was led by a faction of nobles who believed the queen had ruled too long. They wanted younger blood on the throne, new ideas, a more aggressive expansion policy. They saw Jake as an insult and an opportunity. The leader of this faction was Lord Dravek, a tall Valtherian with black markings on his silver skin that indicated his warrior lineage. He made his opinions clear at a public gathering where Jake was formally presented to the noble houses. "This human is a curiosity, nothing more," Dravik said, his voice carrying across the great hall. "He is short-lived, weak by our standards and ignorant of our ways. How can he possibly be worthy of bonding with our queen?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through some of the assembled nobles. Jake stood at the front of the hall, dressed in formal robes that had been provided for him. He felt every bit the outsider that Dravik was describing. But Queen Lysaravan rose from her throne and silence fell instantly. "Captain Morrison saved my daughter's life without hesitation. He sacrificed himself against superior enemies and survived through sheer will and courage. These qualities are worth more than centuries of life or physical strength." "Words are easy, Your Majesty," Dravik pressed, "but we have only stories to support them. Let him prove himself in the traditional way. Let him face a challenge." The Queen's eyes narrowed. "You wish to invoke the trial of worth?" "I do. If this human is to be your champion, let him prove he can defend you." The hall erupted in conversation. Vex, standing near Jake, leaned over and whispered urgently, "The trial of worth is ritual combat. You would face 3 challenges, each more difficult than the last. It is an old custom, rarely invoked. What happens if I refuse?" Jake asked quietly. "You cannot. The challenge has been made publicly. To refuse is to admit unworthiness." Jake looked at the Queen. For the first time since he had met her, he saw uncertainty in her eyes. She had not expected this, and it put her in a difficult position. If she refused the challenge on his behalf, she would appear weak. If she accepted and he failed, she would be humiliated. Through his bond with Zirath, Jake felt her fear for him, but he also felt something else, confidence. She believed in him even if no one else did. "I accept the challenge," Jake said, his voice carrying across the hall. "I will prove my worth." The Queen's expression was unreadable, but she inclined her head. "So be it. The trial will commence in 3 days. May honor guide your path, Captain Morrison." The next 3 days were intense. Vex trained Jake in Valtherian combat techniques, though there was only so much he could learn in such a short time. The challenges would test not just his fighting ability, but his intelligence and his character. "The first challenge is always physical," Vex explained as they practiced in a training room. "You will face a warrior in single combat. But remember, it is not about winning through strength alone. Show skill, show courage, show honor." Jake practiced with various weapons. He found he preferred a simple blade, something like a sword but lighter and more flexible. His reflexes were faster than they had been before the quantum oath, and his body moved with a grace he had never possessed as a fully human man. Lisa visited him between training sessions. "Your cellular structure is still changing," she reported. "The bond with Zirath is adapting you to survive in this environment. You're stronger, faster, and your body is learning to process things that would have been toxic to you before." "Will I stop being human eventually?" Jake asked. "I don't know, but you're something new now. Something between human and Valtherian." Amy and Kyle came to wish him luck the night before the trial. They brought news from Earth. The United Coalition had sent ambassadors to Silvara, led by a man named Richard Cole and a military officer named Susan Martinez. They wanted to negotiate for Jake's return, but the Valtherians had been polite and immovable. Jake was claimed under their laws, and those laws could not be broken. "They're trying," Amy said. "But honestly, Jake, I don't think you're coming home." "This is home now," Jake replied, surprising himself. "I don't know how I feel about it, but I'm connected to this place in ways I can't explain." "The bond?" "More than that. I saved Zirath because it was the right thing to do. Now I need to see this through, wherever it leads." Jake was given 1 day to recover from his fight with Craven. The medics treated his wounds with devices that sealed the cuts and eased the pain. By the next morning, he felt almost normal, though his muscles were sore and his body reminded him that he had fought a warrior twice his size. The second challenge was announced at dawn. This time the trial would not be physical but mental. Jake was taken to a chamber deep within the palace, a circular room with walls that seemed to be made of flowing water. Strange symbols floated in the air around him, glowing softly. Queen Lysaravan entered the chamber, accompanied by her advisors and Lord Dravik. For the first time since they had met, the Queen spoke to Jake directly and privately, though her words were formal. The second trial tests wisdom and judgment, she explained. You will be presented with scenarios that have no clear right answer. Your choices will reveal your character. This is an ancient test that all who bond with royalty must pass. What kind of scenarios? Jake asked. Situations where every choice leads to pain, where right and wrong are not clear, where you must decide who lives and who dies. Her violet eyes studied him intently. There are no correct answers, Captain Morrison. Only honest ones. The test began. The symbols in the air rearranged themselves, forming images that seemed completely real. Jake found himself standing on the bridge of a ship, his ship, the horizon's edge. But everything was different. Alarms blared and damage reports flooded in. Amy's voice, urgent and frightened, came from the console. Captain, we have 2 ships sending distress signals. Both are critical. One is a colony transport with 300 civilians. The other is a medical ship with 50 doctors and a cargo of supplies that could save thousands. We can only reach one before the other is destroyed. What are your orders? Jake's heart pounded. He knew this was not real, but it felt real. He could smell the smoke from damaged systems. He could hear the fear in Amy's voice. How long until the attackers reach them? 5 minutes for the transport. 7 for the medical ship. 5 minutes. Not enough time to think, only to act. Jake thought about the numbers. 300 lives against 50 lives, but with supplies that could save thousands. By pure math, he should save the medical ship. But those were real people on the transport, families, children. Save the transport, Jake said finally. I can't let 300 people die when we could have helped them. The scene dissolved. Lord Dravek shook his head. The wrong choice. The supplies on that medical ship were worth far more than a few hundred colonists. People are not numbers. Jake replied quietly. I won't play that game. The Queen said nothing, but Jake thought he saw approval in her eyes. The next scenario appeared. This time Jake stood in a throne room. He recognized it as the same one where he had first been presented to the noble houses. But now he was alone with a bound prisoner kneeling before him. The prisoner was a young Valtharian, barely more than a child, with terror in his violet eyes. A voice cold and mechanical filled the room. This young one has been found guilty of treason. He helped enemies of the Empire gain access to classified information. Thousands died because of his actions. As the Queen's champion, you must carry out justice. Execute him, Jake looked at the boy. He was shaking, tears running down his silver cheeks. Why did you do it? Jake asked. The boy's voice was broken. They had my sister. They said they would kill her if I didn't help them. I didn't want anyone to die. I just wanted to save her. Did you save her? No, they killed her anyway. Jake's chest tightened. This boy had been forced into an impossible choice and lost everything. Yes, people had died because of his actions. But he had been a victim too, manipulated by those who understood how to weaponize love and fear. I won't kill him, Jake said to the empty air. He is guilty. The law demands death. Then the law is wrong. Jake knelt beside the boy and removed his bonds. You made a terrible mistake, but it was made out of love for your sister. That doesn't excuse it, but it explains it. You should be punished, but not executed. Give him a chance to make amends to help prevent others from being manipulated the same way. The scene dissolved again. Lord Dravek sneered. Weakness. The law exists for a reason. Would you let every criminal go free because they had a sad story? No, Jake answered. But I would remember that justice and vengeance are not the same thing. And I would remember that sometimes the people who break laws are broken themselves. The scenarios continued. Each one was harder than the last. Jake had to choose between saving a stranger or saving his crew. He had to decide whether to destroy an enemy ship that had civilians on board.
He had to judge between 2 people who both claimed to be innocent of a crime. Every choice was painful.
Every answer revealed something about who he was. And through it all, Jake felt Ziraeth's presence through their bond, offering silent support. The final scenario was the cruelest. Jake found himself in a medical bay, watching himself die. His injuries were too severe. The doctors had done everything they could, but it was not enough. And standing beside his bed was Ziraeth, the princess he had saved. The mechanical voice spoke again. She wants to save you using the quantum oath, but the cost will be high. She will be bound to you forever, her life tied to yours. She will never be free to choose her own bonded partner. She will face dishonor when her mother claims the bond instead. Knowing all of this, do you accept her sacrifice? Jake watched the scene play out. He saw Ziraeth's determination. He saw her beginning the ritual, and he understood that this was not a hypothetical. This was what had actually happened. This was the choice Zirath had made when he was dying. "Stop," Jake said. "Don't do it. Let me go. You will die, I know. But she shouldn't have to give up her future for me. She shouldn't have to carry that burden." The scene froze. Zirath's hand was raised, energy glowing around her fingers, ready to begin the oath. Lord Dravik stepped forward, his voice harsh. "So you would choose death over accepting help? That is not honor, that is pride." "No," Queen Lysaravan said, speaking for the first time since the test began. Her voice was soft but carried absolute authority. "It is the opposite of pride. He values her freedom more than his own life. That is the mark of true honor." She waved her hand and the scenarios vanished completely. The chamber returned to normal. Jake found himself back in the circular room, breathing hard, covered in sweat. The tests had felt like they lasted hours, but only minutes had passed in reality. "You have passed the second trial," the Queen announced. "Your judgment is sound and your heart is pure. You value life over numbers, mercy over rigid law, and others' freedom over your own survival." Lord Dravik's expression was dark. "One trial remains, the trial of sacrifice, and this one cannot be manipulated with pretty words and soft hearts." Jake had one more day to prepare. He spent it with his crew, knowing this might be the last time he saw them as just Jake Morrison, their captain. Amy, Kyle, and Lisa had become like family during their years exploring space together. "Whatever happens," Jake told them, "I want you to know you're the best crew I could have asked for." "Don't talk like that," Lisa said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You're going to pass this trial and we're going to figure out this whole bonded to the Queen situation together. And if we can't stay here with you, at least we know you're in good hands," Kyle added. "Zirath cares about you. We can all see that," Amy hugged him tightly. "Don't die on us, Captain. We still need you." That night Jake could not sleep. He walked through the palace gardens under the light of Silvara's 3 moons. The bond with Zirath let him know she was nearby, and soon she joined him by the singing fountain. "I am afraid for you," she said simply. "The trial of sacrifice is the most dangerous. It requires you to risk everything with no guarantee of survival." "What exactly is it?" "Tomorrow you will understand. But Jake, know this. If you do not survive, I will never forgive myself. I saved you only to bring you to a place where you might die anyway." Jake took her hand. "You gave me a chance I wouldn't have had. Whatever happens tomorrow, that's on me, not you." They sat together in comfortable silence, connected by more than just the bond. In another life, Jake thought, things might have been different. He might have had time to explore these feelings that grew between them. But his path had been set. He was claimed by the Queen, and nothing could change that. The next morning, Jake was brought to a different arena. This one was smaller, more intimate, with only the Queen, her closest advisors, Lord Dravik, and a few witnesses present. Zirath stood at her mother's side, her face carefully neutral but her emotions screaming through the bond. "The trial of sacrifice is simple," Queen Lysaravan explained. "You will face me in combat, not to the death but until one of us yields. I will not hold back, Captain Morrison. I will test you with every skill I have learned in 3 centuries of life. If you can withstand me for 10 minutes, you pass. If you yield before then, you fail." Jake felt his blood run cold. Fight the Queen? She was not just royalty. She was a trained warrior who had lived longer than human nations existed. How was he supposed to survive against that? Lord Dravik smiled cruelly. An impossible task for a short-lived human. But that is the point. True sacrifice requires accepting impossible odds. Jake spent 3 days recovering from the trial of sacrifice. His wounds healed faster than before, the quantum oath working through his body to repair the damage. Lisa visited daily to check his progress, amazed by his resilience. "Your biology is stabilizing," she reported. "You're not human anymore, not really. But you're not fully Valtharian either. You're something new. Your lifespan is probably going to be measured in centuries now instead of decades." The reality of that hit Jake hard. He would outlive everyone he had ever known on Earth. His parents, his old friends, even Amy, Kyle, and Lisa eventually. The only constants in his life would be the Valtharians, and specifically Zirath through their bond. And the Queen. Queen Lysaravan came to visit him on the 4th day. She dismissed his guards and attendants, entering his chamber alone. It was the first time they had been truly private since he had arrived on Silvara. "You passed the trials," she said. sitting in a chair across from his bed. Without her formal robes and crown, she looked less like an empress and more like a person. Lord Dravik cannot challenge your worthiness now. But I imagine you have questions. Why me? Jake asked bluntly. You're a queen. You could have anyone. Why claim a human you barely know? She was quiet for a moment, her violet eyes distant. When Kethalar died, I thought I would never bond again. The pain of loss was too great. For 80 years I ruled alone, and my advisors whispered that I was weak, that my grief made me unfit. Some plotted against me, believing they could take the throne from a queen without a bonded partner to support her. But you're strong. You don't need anyone. Strength alone is not enough to rule. A queen needs a partner who balances her, who sees the person behind the crown. Kethalar understood this. He challenged me when I was wrong and supported me when I was right. Without him, I am only half of what I should be. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. When I heard that a human had sacrificed himself for my daughter without hesitation, I was intrigued. When I learned he had accepted the quantum oath unknowingly and survived, I was impressed. And when I met you, Jake Morrison, I saw something I had not seen in 80 years. What? Purity of purpose. You do what is right because it is right. Not because it benefits you. You stood against impossible odds to save a stranger. You accepted trials that could have killed you. You looked at me, a being with 3 centuries of power behind me, and told me you would take me with you if you fell. That courage, that selflessness, that is what I need. Jake understood then. She was not claiming him because of political necessity or some ancient law. She was claiming him because she genuinely believed he could be what she needed. That made it harder, not easier. I don't know if I can be what you want, Jake said honestly. I'm not diplomatic. I'm not trained in ruling an empire. I'm just a ship captain who made a choice in a moment of danger. That is precisely why you are suited for this role. You see people, not positions. You value life, not power. And through the bond with my daughter, I can sense your character. You are exactly what I have been searching for, whether you believe it or not. She moved closer and, to Jake's surprise, knelt beside his bed so they were at eye level. It was a gesture of humility that must have cost her greatly. I am asking, not commanding. Will you accept me as your bonded partner? Will you stand beside me not as a subject but as an equal? Jake felt the weight of the moment. This was not just about him. His choice would affect the entire Valtherian Empire. It would affect relations between humans and Valtherians. It would define the rest of his very long life. But more than that, he thought about what it meant to accept. He would be bonded to this woman, this queen, for centuries. He would share her burdens and her joys. He would be responsible for supporting her, protecting her, challenging her when needed. Through his existing bond with Zira Eth, he felt her presence. She was nearby, probably just outside his chamber. He sensed her acceptance of whatever he chose. She had made peace with her mother's claim and genuinely wanted Jake to be happy. I need time, Jake said. Not years, but days. I need to understand what this really means before I make a choice this important. The queen nodded and stood. That is fair. Take the time you need. But know that while you delay, my enemies plot. They see you as weakness, proof that I am unfit to rule. They will try to use you against me. She was right to warn him. 2 days later, an attempt was made on Jake's life. He was walking in the palace gardens with Kyle when assassins struck. They came from nowhere. 6 Valtherian warriors in dark armor who moved with deadly precision. Jake barely had time to react before they were upon him. Kyle was hit first, a blast of energy that sent him crashing into a fountain. Jake drew a blade he had started carrying everywhere and managed to block the first strike aimed at his heart. But he was outnumbered and they were trained killers. One assassin got behind him and Jake felt a knife bite into his side. Pain exploded through his body and through the bond with Ziraeth. She felt his agony and her scream echoed across the palace grounds. Guards came running, but the assassins were already disappearing into secret passages. They had struck fast and faded faster. Jake collapsed, blood pooling beneath him. Kyle groaned from the fountain, alive but hurt. Ziraeth reached Jake first, her hands glowing with healing energy. But this wound was different. The blade had been poisoned with something that fought against her attempts to heal him. Jake's vision darkened as the poison spread through his system. Then the queen was there. She pushed her daughter aside and placed her hands on Jake's chest. Power flowed from her, different from Ziraeth's healing. This was raw, ancient energy. The full might of the quantum crown channeled directly into Jake's dying body. You will not die, the queen commanded, her voice ringing with authority that seemed to shake the very air. Not for politics. Not for the ambitions of lesser beings. You will live. Jake felt her power burning through the poison, consuming it. But more than that, he felt her. Her fear that she had finally found someone worthy and might lose him. Her anger at those who dared attack him. Her desperate need for him to survive. In that moment, connected to her through her healing, Jake understood what the full bond would feel like. Not the half-connection he shared with Ziraeth, but the complete joining that came with being the Queen's bonded partner. It was overwhelming and intimate and terrifying and right. His eyes opened. The Queen looked down at him, her carefully controlled expression cracking to show relief and something deeper. Jake reached up and touched her face gently. "I accept," he said, his voice weak but certain. "I'll be your bonded partner. I'll stand beside you. Not because of laws or duty, but because you deserve someone who sees you as more than a crown." Tears formed in the Queen's eyes, the first tears Jake had ever seen from her. She leaned down and touched her forehead to his, a Valtherian gesture of deep intimacy. Through the touch, Jake felt the bond beginning to form. It was different from the one with Ziraeth. Stronger, more complete and mutual in a way the first bond had never been. The attempt on Jake's life became the spark that changed everything. The Queen's guards, led by Commander Vex, tracked down the assassins to Lord Dravek's estate. They found evidence of a larger conspiracy, a plot to overthrow the Queen using Jake's death as the catalyst. Lord Dravek and his co-conspirators were arrested. Their trial was swift, their guilt undeniable. The Queen showed no mercy to those who had tried to kill her future bonded partner. They were stripped of rank and exiled to the outer colonies, their houses disgraced. But the Queen also made changes. She announced that Jake would not just be her bonded partner, but would also serve as ambassador to humanity. She established a permanent human presence on Silvara, with Amy, Kyle, and Lisa leading the diplomatic mission. It was a position of real power and importance. "You showed me that my empire needed to look outward," the Queen told Jake during a private dinner. "Your people have qualities we have forgotten. Adaptability, creativity, the willingness to take risks. We need that influence." The bonding ceremony was held 1 month after Jake's acceptance. It was a grand affair, attended by representatives from across the Valtherian Empire and delegations from Earth. Ambassador Richard Cole and Admiral Susan Martinez represented humanity, still uncertain about one of their own being permanently bonded to an alien queen, but recognizing the opportunity it represented. Jake stood in the throne room, wearing formal robes that combined human and Valtherian elements. Amy, Kyle, and Lisa stood with him as his attendants, his crew who had become his family. Ziraeth stood beside her mother, her expression serene. Through their bond, Jake felt her genuine happiness for him. The ceremony itself was beautiful and complex. It involved the exchange of vows in both English and Valtherian. It required Jake and the Queen to share their blood, mixing it in a ceremonial cup that glowed with inner light. And finally, it required them to join minds fully through the quantum oath. When the Queen took Jake's hands and opened her mind to his completely, Jake gasped. He felt centuries of memory of joy and pain, of victories and losses. He felt the weight of responsibility she carried every day. He felt her loneliness and her hope, and she felt him, his short but full life, his simple dreams that had led him